Chapter 3. The Book of the Black Earth. Two white-haired beings stand guard in front of a large stone door. While they resemble men, they are not. The beings are members of the Yazata, specifically the Seraphim warrior caste. They are taller than most humans, averaging 6'8 to 7 feet tall. They are built with lean muscle but possess strength that far surpasses that of a human. Their hair ranges from silver white to a pale ashy blonde. Shimmering like jewels, their irises are various hues of blue, green, and red. With the exception of their head, their bodies are hairless, and they have no facial hair. Were they to be stripped of their armor, one would also find them to be without gender. A brilliant radiance surrounds them, a white-yellow glow that blurs their features to all but other Yazata. Another Yazata approaches them, wearing the gold-plated armor indicative of Seraphim. Unlike other Yazata, the Seraphim are required to maintain at their hip a long sword fashioned of diamond and a golden chakram, a sharpened and double-edged discus marked with the glyph-like symbols of their language. A red sash tied around the approaching Seraphim's left arm marks him as a captain, and the symbol of two jointed crests drawn upon it further identifies him as a member of the 8th Choir. "Blessed day, Captain," greets one of the guards. "What can we do for you?" "I have come to request entry to the heirloom archives." "Do you have your access papers?" Cedrion reaches down to produce the papers, but instead grasps his chakram and quickly slashes it across the throat of the guard. The guard staggers back as his neck splits open and his head falls back, held on only by a few tiny fibers. A bright light explodes from his body, leaving a motionless heap on the ground. "Traitor!" another guard screams, drawing his sword. Cedrion cuts his opponent's sword hand at the wrist with his chakram and thrusts his diamond blade deep into his chest. The sword slides easily through the golden armor and into the Yazata's flesh. The guard coughs, blood running from the corners of his mouth. His eyes flicker with confusion. "My sword is unlike yours. It was a gift from the Devilnay, and fashioned specifically to penetrate our armor." Cedrion steps over the corpses and approaches the stone doors. All buildings in Anshar were cut from singular blocks of enormous crystal geodes by the first craftsmen of their ancient cities, tens of thousands of years before. Cedrion bends down, picking up a small key from one of the bodies, and uses it to open the doors into the archives. The heirloom archives are filled with millions of scrolls, tablets, and books, gathered from many different worlds, times, and cultures. An elite intellectual class, the heirloom are called the Keepers of the Truth. Comprising the 2nd Choir, they are symbolized by the Tree of Knowledge. They are tasked with gathering together and protecting all forms of information, and are generally neutral when it comes to concepts of good and evil. The heirloom are scribes, not warriors, and none carry weapons. They are easily cut down by the experienced Seraphim, who walks with purpose, heading directly for a specific row of tomes. The majority of the heirloom cower in fear behind tables, rather than confront one of the elite Seraphim. "Tell me, where may I find the Book of the Black Earth?" Cedrion commands, grabbing an heirloom by the throat. The Yazata scribe shakes his head in defiance, and Cedrion plunges his sword deep into his stomach before tossing the body aside. "Do not feign bravery. You are librarians, not warriors. Where is the book?" An heirloom finally points to an area in the southwestern section of the archives. Cedrion searches the shelves briefly before grabbing a thick book, bound in a leather-like material, the dried hide of a dahu, a large elk-like animal of their world. He grins, holding the Book of the Black Earth. "You cannot take that!" shouts Darachiel, steward of the archives. "No records must ever leave this building. They cannot risk being seen by mortals." "Mortals will see this book, and it is I who will show it to them," Cedrion smiles, holding his blade towards Darachiel in defiance. "And they will use the knowledge they receive to destroy themselves." "Find a vessel for Yamura. Prepare the way." Elian Schaefer sits up in a heavy sweat. What is left of his short brown hair after years of receding now drips with thick perspiration. He looks down to see that both of his hands are clenched into fists and are ghostly white. He relaxes his hands and slowly color begins to creep back into them. He pushes aside his single, thin sheet. The dark voice that invades his dreams and compels him to do its bidding echoes through his mind. Elian moves to the bathroom and splashes cold water on his face. Again this Yamura, he thinks. Who the hell is it? Elian's thoughts drift to the ancient amulet and its connection to the Book of the Black Earth. Anything connected to that city of the dead, with all of its grotesque statues and temples, cannot be pleasant to meet. Yamura must be one of the unidentified figures depicted on the pillars or inside of the temples. He could have possibly been a priest of that serpent god Nylar Throtep. Elian slips off his t-shirt and changes into a large maroon button-up. He puts on his size 48 jeans and tries not to let his thoughts dwell on the empty space on his bed where a partner should be laying. He returns to the bathroom and brushes his teeth before moving downstairs into the kitchen. Once upon a time, children would run past him as he tried to get to the fridge for his orange juice. Now there is only silence. Those children have become teenagers, now living with their mother in Maryland. They will no longer even speak to him. He stares at a photo on the refrigerator of the once happy family. The four of them are sitting on the floor, no one wearing any shoes or socks. Elian has his arm around his younger daughter. She is about 8, wearing a pink skirt and a white blouse top with purple flowers. Her face is round and cherub-like. Beside them, Elian's ex-wife leans over, her cheek pressed against his. She has reddish brown hair and bright red lips. In the photo she wears blue jeans and a black shirt with sequins glimmering all over it. Her arm is draped around the older daughter, who sits between them. The older daughter, about 13, is thin and wearing blue jeans and a black shirt. All of them are pressed in very closely together and look genuinely happy. Sadness swells inside of him, and he punches the photo when he cannot contain it any longer. That bitch! She took them from me and turned them against me, he growls. Elian impatiently checks his email twice an hour, hoping to hear from Professor Richard Corey of the Linguistics Department of the University of Chicago. As a colleague of Professor Aidan Cohan's, Professor Corey was shipped the Book of the Black Earth on loan from Hebrew University for 3 months of examination. According to Professor Cohan, Richard Corey is one of the world's leading experts on extinct languages and has the knowledge to identify nearly any symbol or marking. With no one at Hebrew University able to recognize the writing style of the text, it was a logical step to have it examined by someone who could. Elian had a good word put in with Professor Corey as a civilian researcher that greatly aided in the book's initial discovery. Greatly aided my ass, Elian thinks in frustration. I found it. He knows that Professor Daniel Elazar, head of the Telebasha dig site, is a glory hound and shared as little credit as possible for the findings. Finally, after 4 days of silence, Elian receives a reply from Professor Corey via email. To eschaefer68 at AOL.com from rcorey at uch.edu. Mr. Schaefer, it's refreshing to hear such enthusiasm outside of the academic world for our work. To most, the intricacies of ancient history fall far too short of celebrity gossip and NFL scores. I'm currently examining the book that I received from the dig you participated in Telebasha. I have a few initial theories and notes that I've jotted down. If you'd like to drive up here and speak with me at greater length about it. I do not have any lectures or engagements scheduled for Friday, so if you'd like to and are able, we can examine the book together. I would love for the chance to bounce a few ideas off the mind of another interested in this artifact, and someone who actually was present within the tomb it was discovered inside. Professor Richard Corey, Ph.D., University of Chicago Linguistics. Before Elian sends confirmation reply, he checks his schedule and decides that he must have his advanced students teach the Friday classes so that he can make the 4-hour drive to the University of Chicago. Unconsciously, he holds the family heirloom, the ancient amulet. He rubs the object between his thumb and forefinger, imagining the wonders of the city of Meschaluas and what they once held. October 23rd, 1896. Leonard Schaefer starts to push his way through the crowd of people gathered outside of his family home in Pittsburgh. "Excuse me, let me through. My mother and brother live here," Leonard says, trying to push his way through the crowd. He becomes increasingly fearful, as the looks on many of the faces are sympathy and sadness. "What's the meaning of this?" he asks in agitation. Some of the people slowly back away, revealing a white-haired woman cradling the head of a younger man. The man's eyes are closed, and his arms hang limply to the sides. "Benjamin?" Leonard whispers in horror, staring at his motionless younger brother. "Mother, what happened?" "Two hooligans broke into the house. Benji chased them out, but one turned back and stabbed him." Abigail Schaefer sobs, holding her youngest child close to her chest. Leonard balls his fists in anger and demands to know if anyone witnessed which way they ran. After two witnesses point him in a direction, he runs off in pursuit of the men who murdered his baby brother. At the end of the alley where the housing district begins to intersect with the small businesses, the young thieves pause to catch their breath after the burglary. "Damn it, Oscar, you said no one's supposed to be home," Theo shouts, still panting as he leans forward on his hands and knees. Oscar slaps the younger boy across the face, silencing him with a forceful authority. "It doesn't matter. We still got away with plenty of expensive-looking things that we can sell to Ernest," Oscar says, holding up the Schaefer family's single heirloom, the ancient amulet. Leonard runs down the alleys before finally coming upon the boys, as they are going through their loot and sorting it out to determine which items can be sold to whom. Theo spots the man first, his eyes widening in fearful recognition. He can tell immediately that the man is kin of the one they just stabbed and left for dead. Leonard stops in the middle of the narrow stone walkway, his fists clenched so tightly that blood drips from his palms. The amulet calls out to him from afar. It whispers to him in a voice that the two boys cannot hear. "Kill them. Avenge your brother with their worthless blood. Kill them and reclaim the property that rightfully belongs to your family. To you." Leonard trembles. Unconsciously, he attributes the voice to his own desire to wipe the earth clean of these two vermin. They're trash. Vultures feeding off carrion and death. "Look, man, we didn't want to hurt anybody. That guy, he just had to go and play hero. He could have just let us go and nobody would have got hurt," Oscar pleads as he quietly slips his knife from his pants into his shirt sleeve. Leonard springs forwards and Theo runs away down the street in terror. "Cowardly little piece of shit!" Oscar screams as his companion deserts him. He palms the knife and thrusts it forwards, but Leonard is much faster than him. Leonard grabs the teenager by the throat with his left hand, and his wrist holding the knife with his right. With one forceful motion, he turns the knife upwards and plunges it straight through Oscar's chin and into his brain. Oscar releases the boy, letting his lifeless body collapse to the street. Trash deserves no mercy. Mercy is for the weak, the helpless. You are not weak. You are not helpless. The voice echoes into Leonard's mind as he squats down over Oscar's body and reclaims the amulet. Some of his mother's jewelry and a wad of saving money, held together with a worn rubber band. You cannot allow the other one to escape. He had just as much to do with Benjamin's death as this refuse. Leonard nods, succumbing to the pressure of the voice and his own agreement of the decision. He wants nothing more than to make the boy suffer for killing his brother. Benjamin and he were very close, and he knows that he will never see his brother alive again. Meanwhile, Theo ducks into an alleyway between two closed stores and tries to catch his breath. He never wanted to be a part of this. He never wanted to help Oscar to rob people. He just needed a little extra money to relieve the burden on his mother and father after they became ill and unable to work. It was supposed to be easy and no one would get hurt. He never thought that Oscar would stab a man in a robbery while trying to escape, and now that man's brother has sought them out for revenge. Oscar is tough and street smart. Maybe he'll get that man off our backs, Theo thinks unconvincingly. His thoughts are quickly ended as he sees a man's shadow growing across the alley wall. Theo turns and runs towards the end of the alley, but finds the gate leading out is locked. He kicks the gate and tries with all of his strength to force it open, but Leonard closes the distance between them quickly. "I didn't kill your brother! It was Oscar!" Theo screams. "You allowed it to happen. You stole from my family. You are vermin!" Leonard growls, his eyes shining with a brilliant rage that is amplified by his possession of the family heirloom. Theo turns and tries to run for the nearest door, not knowing whether it is locked or unlocked. Before he can reach the door, however, Leonard slings the knife as hard as he can through Theo's shoulder. The boy is knocked to the ground by the force of the impact, and Leonard is immediately upon him with a foot pressed against his chest, as he rips the knife free from his flesh with a flash of blood. Theo screams in pain, and Leonard quickly slashes him across the face, cutting him from ear to ear. Blood explodes everywhere and drenches Leonard. Theo thrashes to get free, still screaming in pain. Leonard drives the knife down through his chest, ending his struggle. Theo moves no more, and Leonard removes the knife, standing back up. "I have avenged your death, brother," Leonard whispers. 2 days later, Leonard Schaefer is arrested for the murders of the two street boys. He is hung after a short trial. Leonard leaves the family heirloom to his 4-year-old son, Edwin, sole male heir of the Schaefer family. From Edwin, it would pass to his eldest son, Albert, then to his only son, Franklin, to his second-born son, Elian, after his oldest, Marcus, is killed in an accident at age 19. Elian leaves his home for the University of Chicago, leaving his afternoon classes in the hands of his advanced students. After nearly a 6-hour drive and going through road construction, he arrives at the university with great anticipation. Finally, he will find out more about the ancient book recovered from the ruins of Meth Shaluas, about his family heirloom, and most of all, about the voice that has plagued him for years. "Professor Corey, I'm Elian Schaefer," Elian says as he enters the office, labeled Professor Richard Corey, Linguistics. "It's good that you have come, Elian. This book is truly fascinating and controversial, to say the least." He slowly lifts the book from a protective case it was shipped in. The professor wears sterilized gloves while handling the text, and instructs Elian to do the same. "The language. Can you read it?" Elian asks. "I emailed scans of a few pages to every historian I could find while over there, and no one had ever seen those symbols before. It's definitely pre-Greek. All of the style elements of that era have influences from ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and ancient India. This is something totally different. But I think I've seen it once before." Elian is instantly intrigued at hearing the professor has encountered the language before. In 1952, a French scribe for the Catholic Church came across 3 scrolls in an excavation near the Red Sea. It remained locked away until 1976, when a colleague of mine contacted me after learning of its existence. We traveled to France to study the scrolls. Much like the Rosetta Stone, it was the same story repeated in 3 languages. One was ancient Hebrew, and the other was ancient Greek. Both were readable. The third looked sort of similar to this, with lots of curves and flair. "What was the story?" Elian asks, wishing to hear more about the book and the language it was written in. "It was roughly the story of the Great Flood in the book of Genesis." "What do you mean by roughly?" "Well, it was different in a way. It was written with a very distant approach. It was if it were a news story from another land, detached and very analytical. More attention was paid to the figures and measurements of things than the actual events or characters." "So how does this help me with the book?" Elian asks, enjoying the lesson in little-known history, but also growing impatient. He desperately wants to know why the voice has pushed him so hard to find the book, and what it wants with it. "Like I said, Rosetta Stone," Professor Corey says. "By taking the 2 languages we knew, we were able to decipher the third. We called it Yazatan. It's a reference to an ancient word similar to what we describe now as angels," Professor Corey says, opening the book titled The Forgotten Histories of the World by Professor Richard Corey and Dr. Nazreen Raydoun. "A language of the angels? Well, we don't know that for sure. We just called it that because of the inhuman tone the author of the scroll took. He seemed to write it with a detachment from humanity. It could have just as easily been written by a loner who despised his fellow man." Elian feels deep within his own soul that that is not the case. The supernatural power of the book is far too overwhelming. If there are demons tormenting, then why would it be so hard to believe then that a race of angelic creatures also exists? "Then why write a Bible story?" Professor Corey shrugs. "At the time it was written, it wasn't a Bible story. There was no Bible yet. The Bible wasn't collected into a single volume until at least the earliest 400 BC. "So, can you translate it?" "Give me some more time. I'll see what I can do." Elian nods and shakes Professor Corey's hand. "Thank you. I have the utmost confidence that you will succeed." June 16th, 1968. Colonel Franklin Schaefer hops out of the helicopter and into the middle of the Company D, 3rd Battalion base camp, led by Sergeant Claude Milton. The chopper's blades whip noisily and create a powerful wind that violently shakes the camp's makeshift tents. The Marine units are feeling the pressure of the NVA's increased efforts across the region. "You with the 9th?" A large bald man with a gray, stubble-covered face and arms the size of tree trunks asks loudly over the helicopter's noise. "Sergeant Milton?" Franklin asks, holding onto his bag tightly against the wind generated from the helicopter as he walks towards the other soldiers. The large man nods and holds his hand out in greeting. Franklin takes it and they shake forcefully. What's going on here? The 300B have control of the only known bridge leading into Somai. We need to get supplies into the city. They've been cut off for 11 days. Franklin nods, unslinging his bag and dropping it to the ground. Beside them, the helicopter's other inhabitants finish unloading a few sealed wooden crates before climbing back into the bird and taking off. Franklin's body is tall and lean with dirty blonde hair. From his neck hangs the Schaefer family heirloom, attached to a golden chain. He opens his duffel bag up and removes a folded set of orders issued to him by Brigadier General James Trest. You're still in charge of this unit, Sergeant. I'm just here to provide a fresh eye, Franklin says, handing Milton the papers. It's appreciated. We're all pretty burned out here. We didn't get much rest after Quezon before we got moved downriver. Every time we've tried to take the bridge, they threaten to blow it up. If that bridge goes, we'll have no way to reach Somai with those supplies. We'll have a huge humanitarian disaster on our hands. These people rely on New Yon for any emergency care. There's no hospital in the city. They are suffering and dying. We have got to clear out the 300B and help them, Milton says, passing the orders off to a subordinate for filing. I'm guessing a B-52 strafing run on the bridge has already been proposed. Anti-aircraft guns. Anyone closer than this camp that's airborne is going to be shot to hell. I need a map of the area. I want to know every creek and stream for 15 miles. We need a way to get to the bridge from beneath and take out those guns without detection. Milton sends two young privates off to retrieve a map. They quickly return, and Franklin unfolds it over the ground and kneels, tracing the waterways with his fingers. If we try to go over the embankment by the bridge, we'll be easily spotted. We need two groups to enter the river at these two streams and work their way to opposite ends. The river will have several patrol boats. Taking them out is going to be our biggest priority. While the two groups are coming up the river, the rest of us will need to keep the bridge's forces engaged to distract them from any activity in the river itself. The two groups will then come ashore on the NVA side and plant charges on the anti-aircraft guns. Once the guns are gone, we can retreat to camp and call in for bomber support, Franklin says. Milton grins widely, standing up. Sounds like a great fucking plan to me. I'll start getting everyone prepped. Franklin tosses and turns at his tent that night, haunted by the images of hundreds of young soldiers being killed one by one before his eyes. The power to end this war exists. You must seek the city buried in the sand. You must uncover Meth Shaluas. Then you will gain true strength. For Franklin, finding that power is not meant to be. He never makes it back home from the war. Refusing to seek out that city, Franklin's entire company is wiped out attempting to take the bridge, just as his nightmare forewarned. The misfortune caused by the evil seeping through the amulet is immense. 9800 BC. The rogue Yazata Cedrion stands at the edge of a valley overlooking the human settlement of Arcanus. The largest city of its time, Arcanus has a population of just over 100,000 and is ruled by Alangar, a powerful priest-king. A small, fat-bodied wren lands on a tree branch beside Cedrion and begins to chirp loudly. You can tell the general he can go to hell. I will not return to Anshar just to be placed in shackles and arrested. This human disease is growing out of control. We should have never interfered in their development. They are overtaking all other species of creation and will only bring chaos. The wren chirped several times in response. His judgment is flawed. A third of our brothers believed that when they followed Sane, and again a third more of whom abandoned him and pledged themselves to General Sataniel. His grasp on all other worlds is slipping. Even now he does nothing to quell the Vaitir insurrection. Where was he when the Aesir declared themselves to be gods and took control of Miyagaro? He is an arrogant tyrant who grows frightened as his control begins to falter. The wren flies away, back to report the conversation to General Remiel of the 6th Choir, tasked with tracking down the traitor. Cedrion grins, relieved to have vented. Do you think the general will get my message? He will not heed your warning if that's what you mean. The armies of Anshar are blind in their loyalty and unwavering in their resolve. They will attack us if the Creator so wishes it, says his companion Gadriel. Cedrion continues to smile. Good. I always look forward to a battle. March 18th, 1992. Elian returns home from teaching classes at his dojo and tosses his workout bag on the couch. He moves to his computer and checks his email to see if he has received any responses from Professor Corey. To eSchaefer68 at AOL.com, From rcorey@uch.edu. Got the first couple of chapters translated of that book. I'm pretty confident now it's Yazatan. By using the language as a base, it's coming out pretty coherent, save for some terms that weren't in the scroll so we have no translation for. I'm staying late at the university tonight working on it if you want to come by and have a look at what I've done so far. Elian takes a shower before returning to his car and heading over to the university immediately. Professor Corey is inside his office, diligently reading from both texts and writing in a third book. Good, you came, Elian. We've really got a piece of history here. Professor Corey attempts to explain the Yazatan language key to Elian as he stares at the text in confusion. Once you have a baseline reference in this language, it unfolds rather self-explanatory. It is not in reality an extremely complicated writing system. Much of it is symbolic. A drawing of these symbols indicates many nouns, such as animals and objects. These were the easiest to translate, for the most part. Some of these drawings are identical each time they appear, leading me to believe that they use the form of stamp and stencil. The color of the writing also gives us clues. At times, the carving space is filled with flecks of a golden residue. These instances were in direct reference to divine beings. Much like translating Hebrew, many words that are used have no corresponding item in English, and a new word must be created to explain them. In Hebrew, the names and titles of God have no corresponding word in any other language. In the original Greek translations, nearly all of the different names and titles were just substituted for the word theos, God in English. Translating this myself, I have tried to avoid these events. One changes a word instead of leaving it in its pure original state. It loses much of its meaning. Elian leans over and stares at some of Professor Corey's scribbles. Many of the characters of this language look like nothing more than stick figures drawn elegantly with many curved strokes and precise movements. He notices a translated paragraph mentioning the Yazata traveling to a third world of light more often than any other world. You believe the culture that used this Yazatan language knew enough of astronomy to determine our planet's position in the solar system? It isn't so surprising, actually. Most ancient cultures had a better understanding of astronomy than their antiquity and Renaissance counterparts. The peoples of ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, and Central America all had advanced systems of tracking astronomical events and even predicting future ones. Mayan calendars made of stone can predict an eclipse as accurately as NASA computer programs. The orientations of the Great Pyramids of Giza and several pyramids in Mexico are the same relative size, pattern, and distance from each other as the constellation Orion. We do not give ancient man nearly enough credit. Their intelligence was vastly greater than the way we portray them in our Eurocentric society. Elian flips through several more of Professor Corey's notes and comes upon a page with symbol drawings of several animals and animal-like creatures. What can you tell me about the ruins we discovered the book in? About the Temple of Nyarlathotep? Is there anything in the book referencing these things? Elian asks. Not yet. I would wager that the book ended up in that city, but was written in an earlier time period. Then there would be no mention of the place it was found. So far, this book has described 4 different pre-Sumerian cultures I didn't even know existed, Professor Corey says excitedly. Professor Elazar may have a goldmine of information on his hands, but by being the translator, I'll be able to share some of the glory with us here in the United States. Any reference to someone or something called Yamura? A few, actually. Yamura was part of an invading army from a world beyond the Veil, called Averno, in about 8000 BCE according to the stories. Yamura came into our world with a small force led by his older sister Inyana. He was a ruthless general in his world, feared and respected. They ransacked the city of Katal to cook, but in the end were stopped by a warrior priest named Enkidu. What does it mean by a world beyond the Veil? I'm not completely sure, but I think our closest word that would fit into the context would be dimension. In the text they are referred to as the Sakari from Averno. Demons? I don't think so, though it may be a partial root for our understanding of the word. The book's very clear on the distinction between these Sakari and a race of fallen Yazata called the Devilnae, those of an independent path. The Devilnae more closely fit our modern concept of demons. They are former angels, disfigured in punishment for rebellion, and have a deep hatred for the other Yazata. The Sakari seem to be no more than another species of creature, different from humans and Yazata alike. Yamura? He was a Sakari general from a world called Averno, over 10,000 years ago, Elian thinks. The book also explains how Yamura was put into a stone that was later turned into a pendant. Professor Corey says, pointing to Alien's heirloom hanging from his neck. Kind of like that one. Alien freezes, staring down at the amulet. He's inside of this?